Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us at CyberDuck. We're really excited to have you here for the Remote Design Sprint Masterclass. Today's presentation is brought to you also with our partners at Dovetail and ClickUp. We're really excited to share with you the great content that our panelists have prepared and to share with you our Remote Design Sprint Masterclass. Excellent. So, today's masterclass agenda is going to be covering, I'll just walk you through it. So first, we're going to introduce you all to our panelists. We're going to go over the house rules and introduce you to the topics such as the intro to remote design sprints, the data analysis, managing teams remotely and preparing for workshops. At the end, we'll also be posting a Q&A session. So anyone that's in Zoom and in YouTube, please post your comments and we will do our best to answer as many as we can at the end of the session. Just so everyone knows the house rules for the webinar, it's scheduled to last approximately 1 hour. And within that, like I said, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them and we'll get to as many as we can. So I'll introduce you now to our experts. From CyberDuck, we have Sam Hooper, our UX lead. Hi, Sam. From ClickUp, we have Sophia Kaminsky, their Customer Success Manager.
Nice to be here.
And from Dovetail, we have Lucy Denson. Lucy is Senior UX Designer at Dovetail. However, she is based in Australia. And so I believe it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning over there. So unfortunately, she won't be joining us. She has, however, prepared her presentation ahead of time. So we're excited to share that with you. And a big thank you to Sophia as well for joining us all the way from the West Coast of America. So good morning and thanks for joining us so early.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I'm excited to get started.
Awesome. So just to kick off, I'll introduce you now to our CEO, Danny Bluestone, who will talk you through, give you a brief introduction to CyberDuck. Danny, over to you.
Good morning and good evening and good afternoon. I know we have people from Asia, America, Europe, so it's absolutely fantastic to welcome all of you here today. So very excited about the masterclass. And actually CyberDuck, we've been going for 15 years now, helping clients with their digital transformation projects through a fantastic user-centered design and technology research process and methodology. So pivotal to everything we do is user research, change management, and we run various tech audits and strategic plans to make sure that whatever we design and build, whether they're complex websites or applications or systems, are designed with real users and stakeholders in mind to make sure that things work from the very beginning. Now, we've been working as a remote business for many years now. In fact, we've had staff in America and Europe for quite a while. So we're very, very used to running workshops and remote design sprints with teams who are based all over the globe. So for us, it's kind of second nature, really. We've got clients, as I said, international clients, like Commonwealth, Sport England is one, which we're just showing you an example of here. And what is true to all of the projects that we build or create is they go through a strategic approach. They go through a lot of remote workshops where people like Sam work with the clients who are based all over the place, whether here in the UK or all over the world. And in this particular project, we went through a very strong content audit, content analysis, content design process, as well as web design, UX research, usability testing, and accessibility testing. And this example is an example of where we worked with the Commonwealth, and in fact, we're still working with them at the moment to help them. Obviously, they're an intergovernmental organization, very complex in terms of their structure and the amount of nations that they represent and work with. And we've helped them to create a new digital strategy as well as supporting their website and CMS for them. And the final example here is where we're working with a financial ombudsman, again, on an ongoing basis to help take a sort of quite a complicated complaint journey from citizens about various insurance companies and banks, and make it a very easy to understand process, not only for the end users, but also for the businesses as well who are involved in the complaint process. So again, thousands of sort of complaints a month go through this particular website and system, and it has to be super accessible and usable. And again, it's another example of where we work remotely with the clients. So yeah, finally, we ran a survey coming up to this masterclass, and we asked you, the community, product designers, project managers, UX designers, software developers, marketeers, what is it that you really want to learn about today? And actually, one of the things that you said to us is you want to learn how to, run better data and user research. You also want to learn more about the best kind of tools and techniques to managing projects remotely as well, and managing your team, and just how to run effective design sprints. So both Sam, Sophia, and Lucy will cover bits from this. I'm going to hand you back to Shiv now. It's been great to chat to you, and hopefully we'll see you towards the end of the webinar.
Thanks, Danny. And great, yeah. And I think a perfect point to lead off to that is to Sam. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Shiv. Yes, so my name's Sam Hooper. I'm UX lead at CyberDuck, and first talk today is an intro to remote design. So before I get into the remote design part, I guess I'm going to bring it back to what is a sprint, and we'll whiz through all this, don't worry, it'll be a bit of a sprint ourselves. But basically, sprints came from sort of development cycles and basically pulling out small, doing big jobs, chopping it up into small parts. The important part in the second sentence being a sprint basically is a planned amount of work. It's completed by a team, often a mixed team of disciplines. And by the end of the sprint, it's ready for review or the next steps. In a nutshell, it's basically identifying ideas or a problem that you want to solve, coming up with possible solutions and whittling that down to a solution that you'd like to make or ideally fake, which we'll talk about in a bit. And then you test and validate that idea. Benefits, it's obviously a very fast format like a sprint. Traditionally, it's across a week, 5 days. It can be 1 to 4 weeks long, depending on, context and what you're working on. So for big ideas, it's great to get a ball rolling, but it's also great for moving through small tasks very quickly. You have key players involved throughout a sprint. This adds to collaboration and cross-departmental communication and working agile and all of that. And you have clear goals. So a bit like with a sprint, I sort of thought in a metaphorical way, I guess you want to keep your start and finish lines kind of in sight. Don't make it too big, what you're trying to achieve. And that really helps with that quickly moving through a larger problem in small bits. So when do we use them? Again, just generally talking in sprints, my philosophy is they can help businesses in all kinds of areas, whether that's strategy, even things in operations side. But obviously today we're focusing on design sprints. So that covers, if we look at the next slide, is product design, but also covers, of course, development and project management. So things you need to consider before you do a sprint. First of all, you need to dedicate time to planning your sprint. This is crucial. You don't go into a sprint without planning. Things you need to consider, your roadmap. So where are you? That will give you, on the bigger picture of things, that will give you subject and context that you'll focus on in your sprint. A desired outcome obviously will help you know sort of where you need to go and where you want to get. Who the sprint team will be, so your team and the core team working on this sprint, but also other people that are going to participate throughout at different times, and also the tools and technology that you'll use. Now we'll cover all of this a little bit, but I'm going to whiz through it as I know I've got a lot to get through. So the traditional design sprint is kind of looks like this. I'm not going to go through all the details, but basically mapping, finding out a problem to solve at the beginning, ideation, quickly generating ideas, you know, very low fidelity, sketching it out, and etc. Day 3, storyboarding, or basically whittling down ideas. So you're selecting one or a number of ideas you want to then carry into day 4, which is prototyping. Ideally not coding, but it can be. But the key here is that it's simple, very quick, and not a problem if it fails, kind of thing. And that then obviously takes you into day 5, where you're going to test that prototype. There's also a thing called Design Sprint 2.0, which was basically just combining day 1 and 2 into day 1. So you do your mapping and ideation on day 1. That frees up day 5 for something else, namely analysis and playback, you know, and sort of next steps and all of that. You know, there's a tendency to leave these little details out of these sprint plans, but we'll be showing you how to plan them a little bit better. And I think this is where we now get into the context of what has changed. So here's a little clip of how we used to do things in the background. You can see us working away there. I think that was with the Commonwealth. And then, of course, this little fella turned up, which means that we no longer can be in a room together. But that's not the end of the world. As Danny says, we've been doing this pre-COVID for many years with clients all over the place. And actually working remotely like this can have some benefits as well, of course. So jumping back now to looking at your basic sprint kind of plan, where we've got analysis and playback added in day 5. One of the first things, obviously, you want to plan before you start is who's attending. So first thing to look at would be your team, which are going to be across the board, let's be honest, but it may be different team members and so on. Also, who else is joining? So that is your guests and participants. So that can be anyone from a client, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, subject experts, and so on. Now, the key there is that as you're planning those, obviously, they're not all the same people on every day. And I'll come back to that, why that's helpful and useful in this current climate. But for some just simple tools that we use for this planning stage, obviously Outlook and emails and all of that, but Doodle is quite a nice tool just for picking dates and times when you've got big groups of people. And Adobe Sign we use for consent forms, necessary if people who are attending your workshops are not from your organization, you know, GDPR and so on. You need to have consent to use that data that you get from the workshop. Of course, what else has changed on the landscape? So many tools, not enough time, but there's no simple answer either. Basically, it's a bit of trial and error. For us, it's also about consideration of our clients and what they use and what they might need to use and so on. We will be looking, I'll be going through and talking about what tools we use for what in a moment. But I'll just call out another important thing that has changed, and that is us. You know, we spend our times now in these sorts of meetings, staring at screens all day, and, you know, fatigue from Zoom is worse than face-to-face meetings. You know, I think it's that you lack a lot of nuances, and your meetings do end up becoming literally back to back rather than with gaps in between and so on. Now, how does that become kind of a positive? Well, with a design sprint, it looks like this. This is a kind of really basic structure that we've looked at already. Now, my version of this would look more like this. If we go to the next slide, and you'll see, basically, I've added things that you really should include and plan around. If we go to the next slide, I can't see it, but you should basically see, yeah, we can have analysis, a bit of other research added. And really the key thing here is that your sprint is not just singular, you know, chunks. It is broken up in parts. And as I said before, there are different people involved at different parts, different stages. You could even do 2 mapping sessions at once with the technology we have available now in parallel, right? But The point being here is that this actually lends itself to the shorter attention span of people and needing to work remotely more. And I'll go through each step now and sort of talk about why that is as quickly as I can. So the mapping bit at the very start, where we're trying to aim to define goals and questions and basically the problem that we're going to solve. The key thing here for a remote version of this is that you've done your prep, the stuff we've mentioned just now. You've set up exercises, which we will go through later on. I'll do another talk more focused on workshops and the exercises therein. But basically, the tools that you see that we use on the right-hand side, obviously we need communications, we use Zoom. There are other things like Google Hangouts and Skype and all these other ones, but we use Zoom. We replace the kind of real world, you know, Post-its and whiteboards and so on with tools like Miro and Mural, which we'll go through as well. And we use Dovetail, which you'll be hearing more about, but that's something we've used recently, and that's more video focused. So it's a way of processing video and presenting that to clients and so on in a nice way. But of course, documentation is very important throughout a project like this. Couple of things to consider in any of these workshops. Consider who's attending. You don't get to have that chat at the start of the workshop or a cup of tea in the corner anymore. So get to know people as much as you can, whether that's through communication with them directly or a little bit of stalking online. It's all good. It's saving time in the long run in your workshop. Test the tech and tools before. I don't mean 2 minutes signing in early. I mean way before. Make sure everyone's got it installed or signed up or done things that they might need to do to get onto these tools. They're always quite easy to do, but you know, you don't want everyone doing it at the start of your workshop. So, but now I'll zoom through these. So the next one, ideation. Again, we use very similar tools. We can do it all digitally on things like Miro and Mural, but it's not to say that people can't still draw and show their picture to you on their camera when you can take a screen grab. It's a bit of a hack way of doing it, but it works if you need to do it that way. We try and do everything digitally on Miro and Mural. Here we want to obviously create as many ideas as possible. My little tips here is, of course, keep an eye out for people. In a workshop scenario, you'd see the people who are quieter, you'd be able to have little conversations on the side and so on. That isn't the case on a Zoom call or a Miro board. So just try and pay attention. And there are ways then of creating safe spaces to have those conversations with people, whether it's getting their email or creating a breakout room in Zoom. And you can use that as well for using, you know, different groups of people in a group as well. It's not just for the quiet people. So the next slide was about storyboarding. This is about whittling down what you're doing. So again, we're using all the same tools because these tools allow these documentations to basically become a living thing. So everyone now can start using the same boards. And these are infinite, these whiteboards effectively. So you can keep adding to it and developing from the start all the way through a sprint, which is really useful for collaboration. And like I say, you can also use it for things like voting and making decisions as you go. And again, having all of that in one place is really useful. Having it videoed on Zoom is really useful. And then we process those videos through Dovetail to create a sort of collage of the opinions and things that have happened and so on, decisions that are made. Next step is prototyping. All I'm going to say here is that you don't need many people involved. You're going to be the designers putting this stuff together. The tools are endless, but the things we use, Sketch and InVision combined. We use Axure for more complicated prototypes. But there are things like Figma, obviously Adobe XD and Photoshop, Framer, Marvel. You can still even do hand-drawn things that you upload to tools like Marvel and InVision that will allow you to link them up. So again, keep it simple here. Preferably don't code it, but if you are working within a development cycle, then you know your dev team are going to be involved in this sprint, so they'll know that the code is its small parts and not big picture. And as I say, keep communicating. So tools like ClickUp, Slack, and things like that are crucial throughout all of this. Of course, keeping everyone on the same page, capturing everything we need. Last thing here, or sorry, penultimate thing, testing. Again, we use a combination of Zoom, whatever prototyping thing we're using. Those combined are enough for us to test our prototype. We can record it, put it through Dovetail, etc. If you're testing things like information architecture, you can use, there's a site called Optimal Workshop. And again, your Miro and Mural boards can also function as that. So I'd advise trying to use the same as many, use the same tool for as many things as you can, because like I say, it's a place where everyone can go for that information. And the last step, which were the little steps I added, really, this is all made up of a combination of all those tools we've looked at quickly here. The important thing is these are very crucial parts of a sprint and therefore shouldn't be left out. So try to put them in your plan. You can use a workshop formats to present and have conversations at the same time, which is actually a bit more efficient than how it maybe was in the past, where you do a bit more of a formal presentation like I am now, wait for feedback and so on. Whereas with this workshop format, it invites input and so on. Hand over but don't let go is just simply, it's great when you do these things together, you hand it over, but please don't let go of it. It's not throwing it over a fence. It should be that thing where we're all inputting and adding to this alive thing that we're working on, which helps devs and designers work together. And of course, you can always have another sprint. So it could be a whole new subject. It could be a continuation of this sprint. It's very flexible. That's the good thing about sprints. So final thing to say is, as the facilitator or the leader or the people running these sprints, you are a bit of a Usain Bolt. But that's not a bad thing. At the end of the day, everyone comes in at number one. You've just led them to the finish line in the quickest and most efficient way, and they just follow your heels, basically. So that's everything, and I'll be talking again later about remote workshops and some exercises and things like that. So thanks a lot.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Sam. That was very, very insightful. And now I'm going to present Lucy. Well, I'm going to hand it off to Lucy's presentation. She's a senior UX designer at Dovetail, and I will play that for you now. And this is going to be about conducting data analysis.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining me today, and a big thank you to CyberDuck for hosting today's masterclass. My name's Lucy. I'm a UX designer at Dovetail. Dovetail is a startup in Sydney, Australia, which is unfortunately why I'm not able to present live to you today. The time zones didn't quite work out, but again, thanks to CyberDuck for making this work. For those who might not be familiar with Dovetail, Dovetail is a tool for anyone on a product team wanting to understand and make decisions from qualitative customer feedback. So that could be customer interviews, usability tests, support emails, in-product feedback, any type of qualitative data. The product includes features for qualitative data analysis, which I'm going to show later on today, as well as a research repository. So the idea is that anyone on your team or in your organization can conduct and analyze research and store those findings and refer to them later on. I'm going to be talking a lot more about Dovetail today, but as well as that, the CyberDuck team have asked me to touch on the importance of research in the decision-making process, as well as best practices for collaborative analysis and how we at Dovetail use Dovetail for remote research collaboration. This masterclass has come at a perfect time because we have just wrapped up a huge research project ourselves. And of course, a lot of that was conducted remotely as we're all working from home. So I'm going to use that project as an example today. But firstly, I'm sure you're all aware of the importance of user research. It plays a huge role in the product development process. But today I wanted to talk more about research in the context of design sprints. As you've likely heard in the previous talks today, how you run your design sprint really differs depending on your goals, your desired outcome, the topic, the stage of your product or service. The book Design Sprint by Jake Knapp, which really started the whole idea of design sprints, is a great source of inspiration, and I use it as a toolbox of methods that you can pick and choose from when planning your design workshops. However, the book describes design sprints particularly for new startups building a proof of concept to rapidly test in the market and get feedback from. However, in my experience in more established organizations and design teams, design sprints are usually much more targeted, such as improving an existing feature or exploring a new opportunity in an existing product. And as such, I find that usually it's directional research that has led to the design sprint being run in the first place, or other times more detailed research is required to learn more about the users and the subject matter before going into a design sprint, which is exactly what happened with our research project that I mentioned earlier. We knew we wanted to explore a new product opportunity, but we also knew that we needed to learn a lot more about our users, their context, and their workflows before we could jump into ideating solutions. So I thought that the best way to explain how we ran our remote research project would be to share my screen and walk you through the process. So that's what I'm going to try and do now. And I hope that all the designers and researchers out there will understand that I'm not able to share our actual project because there is private participant information in there, but I've created a copy of how we structured the project, and I'm going to use this as an example for today. So this is Dovetail. This is the homepage that we'll come back to later. If we go to the projects page, you can see a list of all the projects that we have going on in our company right now. The project that we were running was similar to this personas interview project. So the first thing that we did is our UX researcher, Jess, and I created a research plan, and we shared this plan with our key stakeholders, which were our CTO and CEO, and got their feedback and aligned ourselves on what the outcome was going to be. We also circulated this plan with the entire team because we're a very small team and everyone's really interested to know what we're all working on. The project was a large number of semi-structured interviews. Once we had settled on our approach, we used our own channels to start recruiting participants. We also created discussion guides in Notion. Because Jess and I were going to split up and run interviews separately, we wanted to align on the structure of the interviews and the type of questions that we were going to ask. So we created these discussion guides, which were super helpful. All the interviews were run over Google Hangouts, of course, remotely, and we audio and video recorded the sessions. We also invited our team members to shadow and take notes in at least 2 sessions each so that they could get some exposure to the users and the research process. And once we had conducted a session each, we created a note in Dovetail in this data section of the product. As you can see here, we've organized our notes by participant role. Because we were starting to form persona types. And this view was really helpful when working remotely because Jess and I were running those interviews separately. I could so easily see what sessions she had done that day and open them and listen to the recordings and read the transcripts and get up to speed. So that was really helpful. So this is what a note looks like. We have some, again, demographic information about the participant, the recording, and Dovetail has an automated transcribing tool. So we transcribe all the interviews and generate those transcripts below. Once we'd finished running all the sessions, we were ready to start the analysis of the project. There are several ways to run research analysis, and from our research of researchers, we've found that the chosen method usually depends on a number of factors, including the type of data and study, the researcher's experience, the time frame which the analysis has to be conducted in, and the team that's involved. But I think when you're preparing for a design sprint in particular, it's really great if you can include the sprint team in the research analysis process so that everyone can be on the same page of the user needs and problems when you come to that sketching and ideating process. Usually in design sprints I've been involved in the past, this would be done in a physical room with post-it notes on a whiteboard, which is obviously not very remote friendly. Another very common way that researchers do analysis is called coding, and Dovetail uses a very similar method, we call it tagging, to do analysis. So I'm going to now show you how we did our analysis in Dovetail. Okay, so Jess created a taxonomy, which is a list of terms based on what you want to learn from your data. So this is our taxonomy. You can see these tags are the terms. And we were doing a personas type project. So our terms are largely based on the research life cycle, some demographic and skill terms. The process for coding or tagging the interviews would be to go back to the data section, open a note. You can, this is going to be a bit weird, but you can play the video and follow along with the transcript. Sorry, I will pause that. Follow along the transcript, and then when you come across a quote, something someone has said in your interview that relates to a theme, you can highlight that and tag it with the appropriate tag. We wanted to include our entire team in the process as they were all going to be included in our design sprint later on. So how we did this was we assigned a note to each member of our team, and we briefed them on the taxonomy and how we wanted them to analyze the interviews over Google Hangouts, and then everyone got to tag and interview each. And this was super easy to do remotely. It meant that while everyone had shadowed a couple of interviews, they were able to be a part of the process where we start pulling out themes and gathering insights. Once we had tagged all the interviews, which looks like this on the board, Jess and I split up these tags between us, and we each used this highlights table to further analyze the data. So my process would be to use this filter to filter by a particular tag, and then go through the table and read all of the quotes that are related to this tag. And from that, I can start pulling out themes. As I would start noticing a theme, I would create an insight in this column. Like this, for example, researchers create research plans. And I would go through and add this insight to each of the highlights that were associated. And once I had done that for every tag that I was analyzing, we could go to our insights page and see all of the insights that we've created. And Jess and I would work on this simultaneously. So again, it was really easy to do remotely. This part of the process takes quite a long time because it is quite granular, but I think it's a really important part of the process. There's no point conducting all these interviews if you don't take the time to analyze them properly and get all the insights out of them. So I really recommend taking your time at this point. So this is what all the insights look like once you've created them. We would then go through and add a bit more context. You can add cover images and some meta information. You can see that all of the highlights we added from the table are included in the insight, and you can go through and watch the videos associated with them as well. And then we went into our design sprint. At the beginning of the sprint, I facilitated a session I call the input session. And the goal of that session is to bring everyone up to speed on all of the research. And even though our whole team was involved along the process, I think it's really good for everyone to hear the insights at the beginning so that they're fresh in your mind as you start the design sprint. The input session can be a presentation done by the researcher, but for us, we just went through those insights together and had a discussion about each one. We were able to play the videos and kind of go through some of the supporting evidence, and we just had a chat about them to give people more context. I always get my workshop participants to take personal notes or do how might we note taking during the input sessions to help themselves during the sketching and ideating process later on. And that's how we prepared for our design sprint. Because our interviews were so broad, we learned a lot that wasn't exactly relevant to our current project, but were still great learnings that we wanted to refer to later on in future projects. In my previous companies, so often these insights would be lost, but the beauty of a research repository is that they're always there for you to search and refer to later. So if you view the workspace home, you're able to discover insights from other projects. If I'm starting a new design project, I always search for key terms in our research repository relating to the project that I'm working on to see what customer data we have that I can refer to as a starting point, which has been super helpful. And that's everything I have for today. We're always looking for ways to improve how we work remotely, and I would love to hear how others are managing remote research and remote workshop facilitation. If you have any questions or would like to start a conversation about remote work, I would love to hear your thoughts. So please feel free to reach out via Twitter or email, or please feel free to join our Slack community. We have over 1,000 people interested in research and they're sharing tips and tricks. So it's a great place to be. And one last thing, I do have a special offer of an extended free trial of Dovetail for you all today. If you're interested in trialing the tool for your next project, follow the link on this slide and you'll receive 60 days for free. So thank you all very much and have a great day.
That was awesome. So a big thank you to Lucy for making that video for us. We really appreciate it, her time and the effort that went into it. So a big thank you to her and to Dovetail. Excellent. And what I will do now is I will hand it over to Sophia Kaminsky and she will give you a live demonstration of ClickUp. Sophia, over to you. I will just give you, if you could share your screen and yeah.
Thanks, Shiv. So hi, everyone. I'm Sophia. I'm a client success manager at ClickUp. And today I'm just going to be giving you a brief overview of the tool in the context of how to manage remote design sprints. So just to introduce the tool really briefly, ClickUp is a productivity app that helps you manage not only projects and tasks, but also docs, notes, spreadsheets, and more. So it's really meant to help you reduce context switching and keep everything that you need to get things done in one place. And it also has tons of great communication tools that help remote teamwork and collaboration, which obviously is more important than ever these days. So I'll be showing you just a couple of tools that you can utilize to communicate and collaborate with your remote team. So there are three main ways that you can manage your sprints in ClickUp. ClickUp is actually rooted in a hierarchy structure, which helps you to break up work by department or initiative into high-level spaces. And then you can bucket work related to each department or initiative into what we call folders and lists. So here I have an example of how you could manage some pretty simple sprints using our list feature. So I have a couple of different lists I've set up here for my sprints, and then I also have a list to bucket all of my backlog tasks that I'll get to at some point. The nice thing about this is you can actually set up a planned start, and end date for a sprint that would appear in a calendar view or a Gantt view. And then you can indicate specific tasks within your sprint list and set deadlines for them within those planned start and end dates you've set for your sprint lists. ClickUp also incorporates various task views, so you can see all of your sprint tasks and lists in different ways. So for example, if I switch over to a Gantt view, I can see all of those scheduled sprint tasks that I've set up within their parent lists. And I can also track my plan dates that I set up for the list alongside the actual dates. So I can really compare my expectations for the sprint versus what's actually happening based on the actual start and end dates of my tasks. You can also gauge progress percentage for your sprints in the Gantt view, which is a nice feature, so you can track how you're progressing towards that end date. The next way you can consider managing your sprints with, which will offer a little bit more flexibility, would be via custom fields. So in ClickUp, we allow you to add various custom fields to keep track of additional task details that might not be immediately apparent through the status of the task or the title. So for example, in this case, I've created a label custom field, which I can use just to tag my tasks into a certain sprint. So rather than bucketing tasks into specific lists, this gives me a little bit more flexibility that I can just drop a task into a specific sprint as I work. You can even create grouped views based on the custom fields you've created so that you can see sprint tasks grouped by their proper custom field like I'm showing here. A couple of other things that you can use to communicate with your team as you're working on all of your sprint tasks in ClickUp would be, first of all, your comment thread within an individual task. So you can really chat with your teammates and tag in stakeholders for individual tasks related to your sprints. And then at a higher level, we also have chat views. So if you want to set up a daily stand-up chat for your sprints and tell your teammates exactly what you plan to work on, or even communicate how things are going as you progress through the sprint, this is a great way to have that higher level conversation. The last way you can consider managing sprints would be via our goals feature, which is a great way to set up a high level objective that you can break down into smaller, more measurable pieces, which we call targets. So as an example here, I've created a high level goal for a sprint, and then I've created these various targets for the specific pieces that I'm going to get done during the sprint. You can actually create different types of targets within a ClickUp goal, like for example, a number-based target like I have here, or you can actually link specific tasks and lists into your goal. And that way, as you actually complete these tasks, you'll be able to see the progress of your goal update in real time. A couple of other things that you may be interested in related to sprints would be how you can manage things like epics. So in this example, I've also created a list to manage my epic, and this is a great way to see all of those high stake tasks related to my sprints in one place. So in ClickUp, we have a feature that will allow you to link a task to multiple lists. So this is a perfect way to have a task live in multiple locations so that multiple teams can collaborate on it in those locations and also see the progress in multiple locations. So for example, here I have this task that lives in my sprint 1 list, but it also lives in my list called epic. So in my epic list, I can still track how those tasks are doing and really see if I'm hitting all of my goals. You could also manage a risk register related to your sprints. So in this example, I've created a simple list of tasks to indicate risk. And I have a few statuses that I can use to qualify whether a risk is monitored, activated, or closed out. And then I've also included a couple of drop-down custom fields to qualify probability and impact for all of my risk register tasks. Lastly, I just wanted to show a quick example of how you could manage something like a project roadmap within ClickUp. So we have a folder here that I've used to manage a roadmap, and then I've broken my tasks out quarterly in these different lists. Obviously, when you're working remotely, it can be a bit difficult to gauge someone's capacity and plan out tasks accordingly. So ClickUp has some features that will allow you to see how much someone has on their plate and then redesignate tasks accordingly. So in relation to the roadmap folder here, I wanted to showcase our workload view. So this will allow you to actually see, set a designated capacity for how much work someone can take on per week. And then you'll be able to see over a rolling date period how many tasks each person is assigned to and how close they are to hitting their capacity. You'll also be able to see unscheduled tasks in your right sidebar over here. So if someone has some room to take on more work, I can just drag and drop that onto their agenda and add it to their schedule. So hopefully that gives you just a brief overview of what's possible in regard to sprint management in ClickUp. But at this point, I will pass it back over to you, Shiv.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Sophia. That was a wonderful demo, and I hope that our audience found that as useful as we have here at CyberDuck. And now I'd like to hand it back over to Sam. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, that was really interesting. I'm going to go through this, and there's been a few questions posted on the chat and on YouTube. Feel free to add to those, and I'll try and answer a couple of those as I go through this because they're kind of relevant. I hope some of your questions around testing and doing that remotely have maybe been answered a little bit by Lucy's video there, how we are basically using a combination of a prototyping tool of some kind, a video recording tool like Zoom, and then processing those videos through Dovetail, getting those transcripts and being able to tag and kind of pick out all the key bits of really useful feedback we get, whether that's someone actually doing a test, clicking on something, or a user interview. And then Dovetail has that functionality where you can then sort of offer that up to your client or stakeholder almost in the format of an article, which is quite cool. And you know, picture paints 1,000 words, a video, very powerful. So going back to remote workshops. So I'll start by sort of bringing us back, looking at this basic, I say basic, but you know, the template of a design sprint with the little parts to it. In this modern day, effectively, all of these have sort of become workshops. We have to do things remotely. We're doing it not just on our own, with other people, with teams, and trying to be agile and various factors. But, you know, they do kind of become basically workshops. So if we remove the days along this and I replace it more with sort of stages. So, you know, the beginning is in this video as well. It's like, you know, you want to investigate, organize and decide, design, test and iterate, and then implement or move forward. I think it's useful to think about it in that way. So because a lot of things depend in our line of work, you know, and here one of the dependencies is what are you actually doing and where are you in the sprint? Now, preparing for a workshop is very much like preparing for a sprint. Quote here from Abraham Lincoln that I always use, but you know, it's a classic one of, if you've got 6 hours to chop down a tree, spend 4 hours sharpening your axe. In essence, it's preparation is key. So do your prep. So for a workshop, the things to consider very similar, slightly different to a design sprint. So it's your goals, your focus, what you want to get out of it, questions you need answers to, assumptions that you might be bringing with you to the workshop. Who's your team? Who are the other participants? What tools you're going to use and where you want the workshop to take you. Yeah, what's the next step in this process? So if I broke it down a bit more detailed, before your workshop, you should be thinking about these things. So the when are those stages from the design sprint. Who is it that you're doing it with is very important in terms of their technical ability, but also the focus, the types of activities you'll need to do and so on, the type of information they might hold, what you'll be doing. So the focus really of the workshop, you know, but it could be, when we talk about design, you know, we could be talking high level structure, information architecture, content, very specific content, very broad content, visual design, UI, obviously, user experience, the clicking through of it and how it works, the usability of it. So there's so many things that it is, obviously, we're giving you a broad kind of view today. And then tools that you're using, I kind of like to think of those more in terms of your needs. So you need to communicate, you need to brainstorm, you need to also capture all of that information. And then also you've got certain focuses, UX, UI, and dev, and so on. All of this combined will lead you to your workshop activities and exercises, which we'll get to in a second. A few other things though that you can do before your workshops. Like I say, look who's attending, understand them. We don't have that time in a room together to get to know each other so well. So the more you can do before, the better. Send supporting content to people. If you're using a tool like Miro, all of these tools have great resources online, videos, articles, and so on, how to use it. And so, you know, again, if it's suitable for your attendees, send that to them before they start. And as I said before, ideal world is have a meeting beforehand to test all of the tech and everything else. A couple of other things. When you are using these whiteboarding software, digital whiteboards, set your boards up in advance, obviously. That's going to save you a lot of time. Lock layers that you don't want moved. It's a simple thing, but very costly if you don't do it, as your users or your participants will drag everything everywhere you don't want them to. And time box your exercises just to keep it on track. During your workshop as well, a couple of tips from us would be always have more than one person running that workshop. So you'd have, say, one person as a facilitator leading it, doing most of the talking and explaining, and then a number of observers or an observer who can keep an eye out for people who are struggling, help them capture notes on the side, help group things together whilst I'm working with the group to come up with ideas and all that kind of good stuff, which really streamlines and makes it more efficient. It's okay to do some groundwork. So like I said, you know, make a proto persona, educated guess. It saves 45 minutes of conversation. Ideally, we'd be having that conversation in a room together, but if you can't, you can do some of that groundwork for them with research they may have done already, some research you may have done already. And as I said before, look out for the quiet ones. They need a bit of help and you don't spot them as easily in the digital world. Now, tools. The tools that I'm going to be focusing on right now is the whiteboarding tools like Miro and Mural, but of course, things like Zoom, communication tools, and project management tools like ClickUp are all really crucial, of course, to workshops, particularly workshops within sprints, to make sure it's all connecting up and working. Now, before we go on, just quickly, someone asked, Claudia, you asked on the chat, have we used InVision's freehand versus Miro and Mural? Yes, we have. It's not bad. If you've got an InVision license, it's there, you can use it. It's basically got a doodle style. So it is a bit more basic, whereas Miro and Mural both have far more things like what we're looking at right here, which are templates, different things you can use, different fidelities and so on. But freehand is sure, it's not a bad alternative. If it allows a load of people to join a browser and basically draw and make notes. And that is really all you need at the end of the day. But Miro and Mural offer all these other things, which, you know, there are hundreds of types of workshops and exercises we can do, which brings me on to this final part, which I'm going to try and speed through as quickly as possible. I appreciate we're a little bit behind. But giving you some examples of, obviously there are all these templates, they're great, but there are also things you can just do yourself. A lot of our exercises we do as designers, as Lucy said, are very simple. They're post-its and so on, but I'm going to go through a few exercises and things that we do in workshops that I hope you can use yourselves. So first of all, even though it's a digital area, we still need to like welcome people, explain what we're doing, give an agenda, all of those things. So don't forget those things. Miro and Mural actually allow you to choose an area where people kind of arrive. So you could have a little welcome message, for example, telling them to wait and so on. This is just particularly good for people who aren't very confident using digital. Next, you can also do icebreakers. So, you know, again, you might have, if we go back one, you might have not so confident people. Also, we just want to break the ice, right? You might have a load of people on the call that you've never spoken to. So this is an example on, I think this one's on Mural, where we basically set up a grid, give everyone a box, a load of shapes, and the challenge was like 2 minutes, draw an animal. It's a laugh. Of course, everyone's a bit rubbish at it. The real point is that they're learning to use the tool, they're identifying issues. I mean, it doesn't need to be this complicated. It could just be a post-it with double click here and write us a joke. You know, you can think up things just to help break people into using these tools. Now, I'll zoom through some exercises themselves. So discovery, of course, goals. You've got obvious things. How might we, the who, the what, the where, the when, the how, the why, the why, and problem statements and so on. These can all actually just be done very simply as you would in a real life workshop with post-its and the boards on Miro Mural. Of course, we've got Zoom also going on at the same time. Miro does actually allow for video calling through it as well, but you know, we're using combination of Zoom and Miro. It means some people who might not use the board can watch on Zoom as well, just as a little side tip there. So these are kind of very basic fundamental ways of finding goals. There are other ways. We've got a couple of exercises here. So we've got the obituary exercise, which is basically getting your stakeholders to write an epitaph for the old website. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, of course. Here's Spike Milligan's quote of, you know, I told you I was ill. But no, you know, the point here is that they can get out grievances in a fun way and not upset people. There was another exercise there before, which is also future press release, which is basically writing a press release set in the future that helps identify goals people might want. It's just a bit more fun than just asking people what their goals are. This is about identifying risks. So stinky fish, it's about if you carried a fish around for too long, it just gets smellier and smellier. The point here is get your risks out on the table. You can see on the image on the right-hand side, we've given each person that was participating a little group of post-its that they could fill in. And then in the bottom left, you can see in the gray box, that's actually where the observer, so my colleague, would have been grouping all those things into nice groups as we're doing it. So that's a saving tip there. So if you look at the next one, again, there are things you can do very simply. Like I said, a bit like the first ones, just catch-alls. So you do some exercises like the ones we just looked at, and then you just have a board like this and just literally say anything we've missed. You know, don't forget the simple things. You don't have to make everything really complicated. So what else do we look at often? Personas. Lots of great templates on Miro and Mural and so on. This is a Miro one that we kind of modified a little bit. Again, here I made some proto personas. It saved me 45 minutes conversation with the client. It's the way to help people but not lead them, because of course you can scrap your personas with the correct ones. It's all about starting conversations, maybe a few steps in. Try and aim to do that. Here's an example of that where a client had a load of old personas, so we could just put them in our boards. You know, this is the great thing with these digital boards, is you can put any kind of imagery up in here, and you can set tasks out. You might not even do all the tasks, but you're giving, you know, you have a flexibility and an ability to pivot based on the needs as the workshop progresses, which was a lot harder to do in a room where you had to have a bit more of a solid plan. Discovery, final thing here with personas. Once you've identified personas, another nice exercise is known unknowns. Put simply, if persona A walked into the room right now, what would you ask them? And you do that for persona A, B, C, D. Really good way of filling in gaps in your knowledge. Another discovery exercise here, we actually made this one up. This was looking at large institutions / organizations that have loads and loads of departments that often don't communicate very well, and we had to break it down for them. So first part of this exercise, obviously based around a tree, was looking at the trunk. So if we look at the next slide, that's basically looking at the core values, but it's just, you know, again, post-it exercise, being grouped by my colleague as we go. Then the next step is getting everyone to identify their own branches, which are basically their departments. Here you see a lot of like, oh, they don't have the same problems as us, but yes, they do. And it's a great way of unifying people. Again, doing this digitally on a board works because everyone is still visible to everyone else, and there's no siloing occurring. But we're also, what we're doing here is getting them to then populate their branch with, and again, we've used some silly things just to keep it light, but they're owls, which are their key users, leaves, which is expected content on a page, and fruit, which is like exceptional standout content. And now effectively, we've sort of morphed from an organizational, structural exercise into more of a core models exercise where we're identifying users and best content for those users, all in one exercise here. Couple of last few things. You can use these boards for things like, go back one, yeah. So you can take screenshots, obviously, you can chuck this all down. That would take me, you know, half an hour just setting that up in the workshop, normally pinning it all up on the board. But now we can put it here. You can have dot voting, you can have notes being taken. It's a really good collaborative way, again, to make decisions quickly. You can use this for art direction, all sorts of things. Next slide, you'll see as well, you've got an opportunity here to get loads of people in a room. You know, one limitation, weirdly, of the real world was that you only have a certain size room, right? And the number of people that can attend. Now we have an infinite size, and of course you need to plan and manage all of that. But what you can do is get sign off with everyone involved from beginning to end, no matter how big or granular you're going with your challenge. You just keep scope agreed and transparent throughout. Final couple of bits is how you can also use these things to design collaboratively. Now, here's an example where I've set up a UI kit effectively. On the left-hand side, I've just made a load of examples of like what might be an image, what might be a button, and so on. And then the artboards for our participants who can just literally copy and paste those elements however they like. And they can actually start even building pages for you. You know, here's a really great way, again, of involving people that might not otherwise be that engaged. They start getting into this sort of stuff that you see them get more engaged. As an example, in the next slide, here's of ours. Again, the participation brought out really good ideas, like 10 people having ideas at the same time. So you get loads of great ideas. And like I said, you're going to get sign off and inclusion of stakeholders and all of that from really early on in the process. The last thing I have to say on this for us that we found as a little additional benefit, I guess, is once we've started using these workshop formats, we've actually started using them internally as well. So this is an example where on the top, the very top here, is a user flow journey that has been mapped out by our UX design team. Now you might on there have something that just says send form or something, right? Click button, but that triggers 5 things for the devs to be concerned about, you know, lots of requests being sent and actions and triggered and so on. So what we see here actually is the devs then build their flows below with the technical demands and requirements, and we do that together. It's not like UX do their bit and then devs do their bit. They work together on it, and that way UX understands the sort of demands they're making on the devs when they add a feature, and the devs understand why designers are requesting those demands based on research findings and so on. So yeah, so we found it really useful in that way as well. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you for that, Sam. That was awesome. It was great to hear about how we run workshops here at CyberDoc and the amazing tools and techniques that not just we use, but that design teams all over the world can implement to help run productive workshops. Yeah, now we're going to hand it over for a Q&A session. I know we've been answering some questions as we've been going. I've just been going to check out some of the questions in the chats here. Let's see. So, Lee, we have a question. Oh, Claudia's question we already just answered.
Yeah, I've got one here that someone's asked. So a couple of things here, which are from Matt Hare. Any tips on involving exciting stakeholders who might be put off with cost and time? Now, I think Lucy made a really good point in her video of basically involving those people, not just from like the kind of fun parts, you know, when you start actually producing a screen design and all of that, but from those earlier stages where you are talking to users, and with something like Dovetail or being able to show video clips, you know, if you don't use Dovetail, it's the most powerful thing you can have. And I think stakeholders who often maybe don't quite appreciate the value of these processes, the one thing that really does prick their ears up is when they hear their users and customers, you know, sort of calling out the failings of what they've got currently. Also, I think involving them, like we just saw in some of these more hands-on exercises, can create some more engagement. And of course, we have to be realistic, and that not every stakeholder will get engaged every time, you know. So that's where I said earlier that you might see some people kind of drop off a little bit during a sprint. The crucial thing there is that even though they left, you keep them in the loop, and the ones who do show engagement, you drag them in as much as you can, and, you know, almost insist that they are kept on the sprint. Maybe they, you know, they weren't planned to be on it all week or something, but yeah, anyone with engagement is always a great help.
Awesome, thanks, Sam. Another question I can see here is from Jim Dudley, who asks, how exactly do you run your digital tests? Can you talk us through this process?
Yeah, I mean, again, is a little bit of a UX designer answer, I'm afraid, which is it does depend a lot on things, but, you know, it's about, we basically, as I say, we combine a number of things. We're either prototyping, so we're making a prototype on either Sketch and InVision or something like Figma or Axure, all these different tools. You can then, using Zoom, which is what we use, there are other things out there, of course, but we're using Zoom, you can actually, so you send the Zoom link, and then when you share, you send them as well a link to the prototype, and then you're recording their screen. But what they're seeing is basically the desktop website, right? But the great thing with Zoom as well is you can do it on your mobile. And then when you have prototyping tools like InVision and so on, you can have a mobile version. And so now you're actually looking at someone's mobile screen remotely whilst they're moving around and clicking and so on the mobile. So the technology is there now to make it really easy to do this remotely. How you actually go about testing is a whole nother webinar, though, I'd say. So yeah, it's, you know, identifying what you want to find out, setting tasks, you know, or giving them more freedom just to click around. It really depends on like where you're at with the design and what you're trying to find out. Maybe we should do another webinar on that.
Thanks, Sam. We've got time for a couple more questions. So I've got one here from Douglas Carey Brown. I hope I pronounced that correctly. They asked, they're completely new to design sprints. Is it similar to a free Amigo session, user, tester, developer? Is it advisable to have a user run the design sprint?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I see as well someone answered to Douglas there. So first off, I'd say I have to agree with it's just AE here, but I agree with them, but who say that definitely read the book by Jake Knapp on sprints. I think there's a couple that he's done, and another on remote working, I believe, but they are great. So if you want to get a good idea of design sprints and how they work, you get that book. I think the other part of that question is the 3 Amigo stuff. So yes, you've got it. Again, it's obviously depends on lots of things, but the idea with the sprint, it is meant to fit in with this agile sort of methodology of multi-discipline teams. So as you say, with that sort of 3 Amigo idea where you've got a user, a tester, and a dev. Now, I wouldn't let a user lead or run a design sprint. It would need a facilitator, normally a UX designer, but you know, it will be a combination of people: a project manager, a UX designer, a tech lead, or a developer, maybe a visual designer, you know, UI designer. Like basically, you want the people who are going to have the most impact, the most input. And, you know, it is a little bit, it depends again, the answer there. But yeah, it is a bit like that. So yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sam. I believe that is it for most of the questions. If you do have any, please feel free to post it in the chat or send it to us over on social media. We'll do our best to get back to you as well throughout the process. I'm now going to hand it over to Danny to talk about some of our key takeaways. Danny?
So thanks so much for attending. I know we've had people from all over the world. It's been great to answer your questions and hear from you. And of course, welcome Sophia from America and Lucy from Australia. I guess the main takeaways is, you know, data analysis is key. So obviously running the right type of interviews with the right types of personas is going to be absolutely pivotal, and using tools like Dovetail are going to be really important. Obviously, the transparency, the kind of openness, the communication around the sprints and the tasks, as well as the preparation that Sam was talking about at the beginning, and the quotes that he was sharing. It's a really good quote, by the way. You know, tools like ClickUp can facilitate and enable you guys to really prepare. I mean, we use ClickUp ourselves. It's a fantastic tool. We use it across multiple programs and projects. So, but yeah, just kind of making sure that all the tasks are there and being chased and people are using the tools is going to be make or break everything. And obviously CyberDuck are here to help. We're a global team. We work with clients all over the world. It's really important not to take any risks when it comes down to these type of enterprise projects and products. So do bring in the right types of partners to help you. And obviously we'd love to continue the conversation with you. I think on the next slide, we're going to provide some contact info. You can get in touch by email, Twitter, and LinkedIn. See, we've really enjoyed it. We can obviously post the link to the webinar as well, so you can watch the video. And there's also if you haven't downloaded the white paper that we wrote about remote design sprints, please download it. The link is on our website. I think Shiv will share the link on the next slide, hopefully. And if not, it's on our website under resources. So yeah, it's great to hear from all of you, and we'll see you at our next webinar.
Thank you, Danny. I just want to say a big thank you again to our panelists. You've all been amazing. So a big thank you to Sam, Sophia, and Lucy over at Dovetail. Thank you to Dovetail and ClickUp as well for joining us. I know it's early and also late where you guys are based right now, so a big thank you. Please go follow them on social media. Check them out at ClickUp app, and go check them out at Hi Dovetail on Twitter. And please follow us at Cyberduck on Twitter as well. And if you want to contact us and find more information, you can check us out at www.cyber-duck.co.uk. This webinar will be available on YouTube, and we'll be posting out follow-ups and highlights on our social media channels. So if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. And thank you for attending, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.